Kyrie, friends. Welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mark Graves, and today I'm going to be telling you about mystery cults. As I've discussed before, public religion in the ancient world was just that, public. It was something that you participated in as a city or as a country all together, big festivals, big ceremonies, and it wasn't something that was particularly personal or private. If you wanted something more along those lines, you might consider joining one of these mystery cults. And they're called mystery cults because most of them have some sort of initiation or hazing ceremony that they kept on the down low. They wouldn't really talk about with someone who was uninitiated. Now, there were a bunch of different kinds of these. Some of them were associated with a particular guild or tribe of people. So all the sailors might have one cult that most of them joined. And some of them were just open to the public if you were interested in them. And some of them, it was really just about having a personal experience of the divine, of religion. And some of them offered very concrete benefits for this life or for the next. So I'm not going to go really deep into any of these. I'm just going to give you an outline of some of the most well-known and the most interesting, and then encourage you to go look into any of these if they really spark your interest. First, I'm going to do the Eleusinian Mysteries. So these took place every year at a place called Eleusis, and they were open for anyone to participate if you're willing to pilgrim yourself there to participate. And they're held once a year, and they seem to be associated with Persephone and her mother Demeter. So, as you probably know, Persephone was the daughter of Demeter, and she's kidnapped by Hades, taken into the underworld, and then Demeter tries to go and find her and bring her back. And so it's thought that maybe part of the initiation ceremony involved reenacting this myth. So maybe you went down into a cave under the ground, and then you participated in something, and then maybe you came back up. We're not sure, but that's one possibility. There's also a possibility that you were bathed in pig's blood, because that has some associations with Persephone, because it's, or piglet's blood, sorry, specifically because it's a young thing. We also know there were mystagogos, which is basically mystery, and then gogos is like teacher, so you're a mystery teacher, so that's someone who's already been initiated, who walks through with you if you're being initiated for the first time. And we also know that they all had a long march, either to or in between initiation points, and they all marched in these white robes with yellow bands tied on their arms and legs. So that's what we know about those. Next are the Samothracian Mysteries. There's even less we know about these, but this is one of the ones that seems to be for a particular guild. So for people who worked on or near the sea, because the initiates, they wore purple sashes, they confessed their worst deeds, they wear iron rings, but then supposedly they're granted protection on the sea. So that's sort of the point of joining this particular cult. Then we have the Bacchic mysteries associated with the god Bacchus, and these are quite wild, according to the stories. So for these ones, there was no specific location, really. It seems like the people who would initiate you into this were just wandering. They just wandered around and would offer to initiate people and throw these initiations. Involved in this was ascending mountains, phallic symbols, of course, you have to have those, and you would learn mysteries about Dionysus's history from golden tablets, which were placed in corpses' mouths, apparently, and there may have been tearing animals apart, and orgies are a possibility here because that's sort of a staple of Dionysic Bacchic rites, and we have stories not only of actually tearing animals apart, but there's a whole Greek play on a time that some humans got torn apart by their relatives who were so driven mad and ecstatic by these ceremonies by Bacchus that they tore their family apart, which is lovely. And one of the benefits to joining this cult, aside from having a good time now, was that you would have eternal feasting and drinking in the afterlife. So definitely has a dark side, but also some benefits. Next is the cult of Mater or belly. Mater is a very old goddess, and she's not just Greek, she's in the Middle East as well, so she's very interesting. One of the stories about her is that she fell in love with her own son, actually, and at the wedding, not of them, but he was going to marry someone else, some young girl, she was so mad that she drove her own son mad so that he castrated himself, Attis, and then in some stories everyone else at the wedding also castrated themselves, and the bride chopped her breasts off. So a very scary goddess in a lot of ways, not one to be taken lightly. And her cult or her priests were called the Godly, and these were people who castrated themselves, and they often dressed in a very feminine way, dresses and makeup, etc. And so it's sort of hard to tell if these were just men, or if eunuchs, or if we should consider them maybe transgender women, or if they were just something in between. They definitely unsettled most of the people that they were around, but even Rome eventually decided to allow them, at least most of the time. They sort of just decided to let them exist within their empire. So they not only castrated themselves, but they would be sprinkled with the blood of a bull that had been castrated when they were initiated. So definitely a very hardcore cult, but also a very interesting one. Next is the cult of Mithras. So this one was particularly popular in the Roman military, and it spread through them all across Europe and the Roman Empire. There's even evidence of it getting to Britain. So very popular and widespread, and it seems to have a lot of similarities to the Masons. So there was an initiation that was held in these caves, and in these caves would be frescoes of sort of the history of the universe and whatever mysteries were being explained to you as you went through this initiation. And there were 7 degrees that you could earn. So there was Raven, Bride, Soldier, Lion, Persian, Sign Runner, and Father. And then finally there was also a sacrifice of a bull involved somehow, so a Tarok Tani. So that is the cult of Mithras. So finally are the mysteries of Isis. Isis, of course, is an Egyptian goddess, but she gets adopted by the Greeks and the Romans, especially after Rome conquers Egypt. They spread her all over the place, and there's definitely a tendency in the ancient world not to dismiss other people's gods, but to either adopt them or to say, oh, that's the same god that we have, it's just you have a different name for them. So she sometimes gets associated with Persephone or Victory, or Fortune. She gets associated with a bunch of different Roman goddesses, or sometimes she's just called Isis. But she definitely becomes very popular in Rome. Now, part of the initiations that we do know of are that you read books that probably have the mysteries in them that you get to find out. And there's fasting, you wear linen, not wool. Apparently that's important. And you undergo a journey. And I think this is just a symbolic little journey, like around a temple. You don't actually have to go on a big journey, but there's some sort of at least symbolic thing involved. And we have a great story by Apuleius in his novel, The Metamorphoses. So I'm probably gonna have to do at least one video on this at some point, but it's this great novel that's very trashy. It's full of sex and violence, and it's a ton of fun. And the main character is going on this journey, and he is intrigued by these stories he hears about a local witch. And he has to see her do magic, so he arranges to spy on her while she's doing this. But of course he gets turned into a donkey, and then most of the novel is him going on all these misadventures as a donkey. And eventually he ends up by this sanctuary of Isis, this temple, and she appears to him and says, look, you can be human again, but go, be initiated into my cult and become a servant of mine. And he does, and he finally stops being such an ass. Haha. And he kind of gets his life together, and he starts to tell us a little bit about the cult, but then he, of course, cuts himself off and says, no, I can't do that because that would be bad. So it's a great story that we actually have about somebody being initiated into one of these cults. Thank you so much for checking out this video on cults in the ancient world. I hope to see you again next week. I try to put a video out every Sunday, and thank you so much to everyone who is subscribed. Karete.